He pushed open the door of the little diner, the scent of fried chicken and fresh bread hitting him like a memory he couldn't place. Rain dripped from his coat, leaving dark patches on the worn tile floor, and he felt the familiar knot of loneliness tighten in his chest. Life had become a series of long, silent evenings, and he had convinced himself that dining alone was safer, simpler. No explanations, no expectations. Just him, his food, and the quiet. He slid into a booth near the window, the neon glow reflecting faintly on the raindrops outside. A steaming cup of coffee arrived quickly, the barista giving him a polite nod that said nothing more than, "I see you." He stared into the dark liquid, tracing the ripples like lines on a map he didn't want to read. He thought of all the evenings he had spent alone, the conversations he had avoided, the invitations he had declined. He didn't belong anywhere, not really, and the thought had settled into him like dust that never brushed off. His order of meatloaf arrived, rich and steaming, and he exhaled, a little of the tension leaving his shoulders. This was his ritual: eat, pay, leave. He didn't want company, didn't want small talk, didn't want the risk of disappointment. But then a small voice broke through the quiet. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" He looked up to see a woman with tired eyes and a warm smile, a little boy clutching her hand. His first instinct was to shake his head, to apologize without words, to retreat back into the solitude he had carved out for himself. But something about the mother, the way she seemed almost hesitant, almost pleading, made him pause. "My son's hungry," she said softly. "Can we stay a while?" Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of need, of trust, of hope. He felt a twinge of something he hadn't felt in years. Connection. There was no threat here, no hidden agenda, just honesty and a request for human kindness. His chest tightened, and for a moment he realized that this tiny act of letting someone share your space, your meal, was bigger than he had remembered. He nodded slowly, a small gesture that felt monumental in its significance. She smiled, relief washing over her features, and he watched as the boy's eyes lit up at the prospect of food. Something inside him stirred, a long-forgotten warmth, and he felt the corner of his mouth lift in a smile he didn't quite recognize. As she set down a cup of hot chocolate for her son, he realized that life had a way of sneaking in moments like this, moments that could change the trajectory of a day, a life, sometimes even a heart. He wondered briefly if he had been waiting for this moment without knowing it. The boy was shy at first, fingers twitching around the rim of his cup, eyes darting nervously to the stranger who had, minutes ago, been alone in his booth. But hunger has a way of breaking walls, and soon he was laughing at a small joke the mother made, the sound like a bell in the quiet diner. The man watched, curious and cautious, as the mother portioned her food, offering half of her sandwich to the boy, explaining the carrots and peas in patient, gentle tones. He felt a pang of recognition. He remembered meals where someone had done the same for him long ago, but those days were buried under years of solitude. Today, though, he could see them again, mirrored in the tiny boy across from him. "You know," he said quietly, surprising himself, "I used to share my lunch with someone every day when I was a kid. My neighbor's little sister. She had the biggest appetite and the smallest hands." The mother glanced up, smiling softly. "It's amazing how kids remind us of what's important," she said. He nodded, feeling the warmth creep up his neck, the tension in his shoulders easing. For the first time in a long time, he felt included in a moment that wasn't about him alone. He listened as the mother and child talked about school, about a dog named Max, about the art project that had gone hilariously wrong. Every laugh, every small anecdote, chipped away at the walls he had built around himself. When the boy spilled a little chocolate on the table, he found himself reaching out to help, the gesture automatic. The mother's eyes met his, gratitude and surprise flickering there. No words were necessary. This was human connection, wordless, profound, restorative. He realized then that the world didn't owe him company, and yet sometimes it offered it anyway. He had been hiding from moments like this, afraid of being hurt, afraid of being asked too much. But now the fear seemed unnecessary, almost absurd compared to the simplicity of a shared meal, a shared laugh, a shared understanding. He started to tell a story from his own childhood, a funny incident with a runaway dog and a neighborhood ice cream truck. The boy laughed, eyes sparkling, and the mother's laughter blended in, creating a little pocket of warmth and light that pushed back the gloom outside. The timed dessert arrived, a small slice of pie for the boy, some leftover kindness extended to him. The man realized that his solitary meal had become something else entirely. It was no longer a ritual of isolation. It was a celebration of what could happen when someone simply said yes. Hours passed unnoticed. The rain had stopped. The neon lights dimmed. But inside the diner, the warmth lingered. The boy had fallen asleep against his mother's shoulder, chocolate-smeared face and all, while the mother whispered gently, brushing stray hair from his eyes. The man sat quietly, finishing the last of his meal, a sense of calm settling in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. His own loneliness felt less like a burden, and more like a prelude, something that had led him to this exact moment, to this tiny act of shared humanity. The mother finally stood, gathering the boy in her arms. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but unwavering. "You didn't have to, but you did. You made a difference." He waved it off, the words unnecessary. But the truth was undeniable. This encounter, fleeting as it might seem, had altered the trajectory of his day, maybe even his heart. He had learned again that kindness was not transactional. It was transformative. As they walked out, he stayed behind for a moment, staring out at the rain-slicked streets. People hurried past, oblivious to the quiet miracle that had occurred in a small diner booth. He sipped the last of his coffee, feeling the warmth seep down into his soul, and made a silent vow to notice, to care, to allow himself to be part of these small moments of human connection, rather than retreating from them. And then, with a quiet resolve, he left a generous tip on the table, grabbed his coat, and stepped out into the world. It was brighter now somehow. A world where a stranger could say yes, where a mother could ask, and a man could discover that sharing a meal could also mean sharing a piece of humanity he hadn't realized he'd been missing. As the diner door closed behind him, he smiled. He hadn't expected company. He hadn't expected gratitude. He hadn't expected the warmth that lingered long after the meal was gone. But most of all, he hadn't expected to feel, again, the quiet, powerful truth that even small acts of kindness could make the world feel like home.